I commend my plant-based friends. I think this is courageous, frankly, of all of us to have this dialogue. And I don't view dairy and plant as a zero-sum game. I think that it's a testament to everyone that let's produce as best we can the facts in an honest way to where consumers can choose plant or dairy. I mean, that is really my only interest in this forum, is to get as much information across as we can to consumers, and they can make their own decision, whether it's plant or whether it's dairy or anything in between.
I think the biggest thing is listening to this, and I want to let you know that I am one of the 50 that just got an AMP grant.
Congratulations.
So I will be starting that project next year. It's a $609,000 grant to do almost exactly what you said. In the North Bay, one of the things that we have to really remember is the manure management and things like that has been so far ahead of the rest of the state of California. Going back clear into the early 80s, farmers up there, when Department of Fish and Game could not sample watersheds, we all stepped up and said, here's money. We'll go sample with a third-party monitor to make sure manure wasn't getting into the creek. So manure management has been a huge thing in the North Bay for, like I said, 30-some years. The day-to-day is, for us, we've been pasture-based since 1948. My grandfather was, even before we went organic in 2006. And it's just been, it's one of those things that we've always knew that you raised enough animals to pasture the ground, but not create a problem with the manure. So we were able, my grandfather built first manure pits back in 1968 before the Clean Water Act, because he knew that manure could be used as a fertilizer to grow more grass, to feed more cows. So, the day-to-day is just trying to make sure that we're doing the right thing, telling our story. I think we're afraid sometimes to really tell the story, what we're doing, because pictures tend to hit the internet and people don't understand the story behind it. So a calf hutch, everybody says, well, why do you raise your calves in these little pens? Well, if you think about any of you that have had children, the baby goes in a crib until it is ready to be really intermingled with other older children. And that's the same thing we do with the calf hutch. It's there for its safety. We're feeding it. We're taking care of it. And at about 3 to 4 months old, when we feel comfortable that it can be intermingled and we don't end up with injuries, that's why we do that. But if that picture hits the internet, and there might be a little bit of manure there and it looks dirty, our views of the dairy industry just get to be really...
So you shut down rather than sharing your experiences.
Generally speaking, if we just take a glass of, let's say, 2% milk, there's going to be about 8 grams of protein in it. I think protein is sort of the first place that we start. It tends to be the highest, as far as I can tell, with as much internet digging as I could possibly do and setting a group of students on the task as well. Nothing comes quite as close to milk in terms of protein, and it's also high quality protein, meaning that it has all the amino acids you need in the right amounts that you need them. That said, there are other milk products that contain almost as much. Something like soy milk will have like 7 grams of protein in a glass, and it also is a fairly complete protein. So when we're just talking about protein, they're somewhat comparable. Calcium's a different story, right? The calcium in milk, calcium you need for your bones, it's very important. The calcium in milk is very bioavailable, meaning that your body can use it very readily. The calcium that is added to the other milk products, some of it is more bioavailable than others. So sometimes you'll see something like, I can't think of one off, Ripple is a pea milk, right? I'm pretty sure on their website this morning I noticed that it said it has more calcium than a glass of milk. That may be true, but is it as bioavailable? Meaning, can you actually use that calcium? I don't know the answer to that question. That could be something for discussion.
It's funny how often poorer cultures value food more than richer cultures, and that's insane. I mean, it just is wrong. You go to Peru and you look at the way they eat, or you go to Colombia or Argentina or Vietnam, or where we get our cashews, in Cambodia, and obviously the GDP is a lot less than here, but the way they love food is completely different than Jack in the Box and the newest KFC with 2 donuts and fried chicken in between. And that's mankind, or U.S. mankind food thought being expressed. I have a different view, might not be right, but I'm cool with where I am.
California needs livestock grazing for a variety of purposes. For one thing, livestock in California remove approximately, this is a back of the envelope calculation that a student of mine did, about 9 million tons of biomass, mostly dried annual grasses, or annual grasses also not dried, but would also actually wind up as dried annual grasses if they weren't consumed by livestock. About 9 million tons of that a year. And that is stuff that starts fires. Mm-hmm. It's also stuff that chokes out habitat for native species and for native vegetation. So, for example, I went to a talk this year in my department. We were hiring some biologists, and one of them was an aquatic biologist, and he showed pictures of a healthy coral reef. And there are these beautiful fish swimming around the healthy coral. Many of them are herbivorous. They swim around eating and gnawing on algae all day, I guess, in these coral reefs. And then the next picture he showed what happens if you take those fish away. And the whole thing becomes overwhelmed by algae. And I looked at that and I thought, oh my God, California is kind of in that state. We have this tremendous growth of vegetation. And a lot of that is related to the fact that our vegetation is not, it's a mix of vegetation that's been here and evolved here with our wildlife, tremendous variety of wildlife, with our native species. And a mix of that and plants from all over the world that have a similar climate to us.
And the roughage is actually what generates methane, because the methane-forming microbes need roughage. So on the one hand, grass-finished animals will produce more methane through enteric process. That's a downside. But an upside is that rangeland sequesters carbon. It sucks up carbon and stores it in the ground. We don't yet know exactly how much, but we know it's vast.
Plant-based foods as a whole in grocery retail is 4.5 billion. That's grown 31% since 2017. And that's across, so the majority of that is plant-based milk, and that continues to grow. And the remaining is plant-based meat and alternative dairy, yogurt, creamers, butter. So it's products across the store. And so, yeah, I think that we have some demographic information. You know, there's a lot of research that's available, and we try to do our best to vet it, just like any consumer should.
We always talking at the Department of Food and Ag that California is special because of what we grow, and we've already covered that, and how we grow it. And I think that's really important, and it's what we're talking about here. It's knowing how the food is grown, and the land that it is coming from as well. So as we look at regardless of whether it's animal-based or plant-based, things that are going on in the Amazon rainforest, for example, through either grain production or cattle ranching, are having, the climate is not going to be able to sustain that land use change that's happening there. Same with palm oil production in the South Pacific. So there's a whole host of things that we really need to be looking at as we're thinking about our food system and how we're managing the land in concert with biodiversity, in concert with environmental benefits. We talk a lot about endangered species and grazing. Those things, as long as we are thinking about, and as consumers, we're really striving to know more about how is it grown, what are the co-benefits, what are the cohabitats, what are the things that the farmer or rancher are thinking about when they're producing that food. That, I think, is much more telling to us and will help us get to really where we need to be on climate for sure. But that IPCC report and land use change as a whole is a dramatic driver in our climate for sure.